Hello, I'm Dr. Michelle Tubman and I am the founder of Ways of Health. I'm a weight loss and life coach, but I'm also an emergency physician. And it's the physician in me that really likes to understand the evidence behind and the science behind the methods that I use in my coaching practice. And so I've decided to come on here live on both Facebook and Instagram weekly to share some of the studies, some of the science, some of the evidence behind the methods that I use in terms of teaching nutrition, movement, and mindset to my weight loss coaching clients. And so I thought I would start with a topic that's easy for most of us to understand, and that's the issue of junk food, what it is, how it affects our health, and whether or not it actually has a place for us in a healthy diet. And so I think most of us intuitively understand that junk food is not so fantastic for us. In fact, when I ask my weight loss clients what they've done in the past to help them lose weight, they will almost always say that they just tried to cut out junk food. And so on a personal level, it's obviously very important, but it's also important on a larger societal level as well. And that's because chronic diseases such as cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, and certain cancers are responsible for almost 70% of all deaths worldwide. And so it makes sense that we'd want to better understand the risk factors that contribute to these diseases, especially when it comes to things that are within our control to reach, in our control to change, including what we choose to eat. And so we all intuitively know that unhealthy diets contribute to many of these diseases. But what does the science actually say? Well, Chen and his colleagues took a look at all of the studies done on ultra-processed foods to determine exactly how they affect our health. There it is there. And he published the results of his findings in the Nutrition Journal in August of 2020. And so, first off, what exactly are ultra-processed foods? Well, these are foods that have been altered from their original state by multiple processes that include things like rolling, puffing, grinding, pearling, and oftentimes artificial colors, flavors, sweeteners, and emulsifiers are added as well. And these will give foods a longer shelf life, but they'll also make them super attractive to our palates. And so examples of these ultra-processed foods include things like soft drinks, sweets and candy bars, chips, bacon, all of those sugar-sweetened breakfast cereals, and fries as well. And the bottom line from this study is exactly what you'd think, that the people who consumed the most highly processed foods experienced the worst health outcomes. And so who exactly were the people eating the most? Well, these were people who were getting 30% or more of their daily calories from these highly processed foods. So 1/3 of their diet was made up of junk foods. And specifically, these people were much more likely to be diagnosed with things like heart disease, high blood pressure, strokes, metabolic syndrome, cancer, primarily prostate and colon cancers, depression, and also irritable bowel syndrome. And in addition, they also tended to die at a much younger age than people who consumed less junk food. And so Chen and his colleagues also looked at which countries were eating diets higher in these ultra-processed foods. And it may not surprise you to learn that it's highest here in North America, with 57.6% of daily calories of the average American coming from junk food. And unfortunately, the rest of the world isn't faring that much better either. So for example, in France, 35.9% of the daily calories are coming from junk food for the average citizen, and in Mexico, that number is 29.8%. And so finally, Chen and his colleagues also explored why diets loaded with these ultra-processed foods raise the risk of pretty much anything that can go wrong with our health. And they described two main reasons in this paper. And so the first reason is that highly processed foods are very high in calories, and they're also designed to be easy to overeat. So they're often loaded with unhealthy fats, sugar, and salts, but they also tend to be low in all of the things that are good for us, like fiber, vitamins, and minerals. And so food companies also literally engineer these foods to be hyperpalatable, meaning they taste so good to us, they have exactly the right texture, and they leave us wanting more. And so these foods also trigger our natural reward systems much more than whole natural foods do. And so that release of dopamine in the brain that we get when we eat junk food really leaves us wanting more and more of it. It's a really vicious cycle for us to get stuck in. And so the second reason researchers give is that ultra-processed foods crowd out the more nutritious foods. So if a big chunk of your diet is coming from soda and fast food, then there's less space for the nutritious stuff, the veggies, the fruits, the lean meats, and all the other minimally processed whole foods that we want to see more of in our diet. And so the question that remains for us is there room for junk food in a healthy diet? And my answer to this really is that the dose makes the poison. So if you're eating a healthy, balanced diet with adequate healthy fats and protein, and you're also getting your veggies in, and you're progressing towards your goals the way you want to, then having a processed treat now and again isn't going to do you much harm. And in fact, it may even help you stay on track. But if the rest of your diet is composed of chicken nuggets, milkshakes, and Doritos, then you're definitely going to see lots of improvements in your health and your weight if you replace some of that ultra-processed stuff with more real whole foods. I want to also emphasize here, though, that saying never to junk food really often backfires on us. For many of us, blacklisting foods just makes us want them even more. And so instead of looking at these foods as a definite no-go, look at them instead as foods you just want to eat less of. And what less is for any of us will be different for each one of us, depending on what our current diet is. But generally, a good rule of thumb to follow is to try to keep those ultra-processed foods, the junk food, to less than 10 to 20% of your diet, with the minimally processed whole foods comprising up the rest. But if you're like the average North American and you're nowhere near that yet, you can't really expect yourself to just all of a sudden flip a switch and be there, right? Instead, you want to focus on being just a little bit better. We're looking for progress, not perfection here. So look for ways you make small changes to your diet, like small ways that you can replace ultra-processed food with less processed foods. And these could be things like adding extra veggies to your pizza or ordering it with thin crust instead, or just having a piece of fruit before you open the bag of chips, or perhaps having carbonated water with a little bit of juice in it instead of drinking a can of soda. Or again, just try maybe stopping at the grocery store for a rotisserie chicken instead of buying a bucket of fried chicken. Now, I know that making these small substitutions may not feel like massive action to you in the moment, but when you start doing these little things consistently over time, they really add up and you start to see bigger changes. And finally, I just want to end this by offering you one last thought. And that's that oftentimes a diet loaded up with highly processed junk food can really be a symptom of a deeper problem. And so before you commit to making any changes in your diet, it could be helpful to just take a step back and ask yourself, why are you eating those foods in the first place? Is it because you're too busy to prepare healthy foods at home? Or maybe you're snacking to soothe feelings of loneliness, sadness, anger, or any other emotion you might be experiencing. Or is it that you're trying to burn the candle at both ends and you're just eating to stay awake? Or perhaps you're finding yourself eating all the homey goodies that always show up at the office at work. Or maybe you live somewhere where it's just simply difficult to access or afford the wholesome foods. In any case, by taking a close look at why you're eating the foods that you do, you'll be better able to plan the strategies that will work best for you and your unique circumstances. Alrighty, so I'll end this here, and I'll see you next week where we'll talk about exactly how stress contributes to weight gain and how stress makes it difficult for us to lose weight. In the meantime, if you think these little mini talks might be helpful for you, I'll have them loaded up on my website by Thursday of every week. So you can just hop on over there to find them if you're interested. I'm over at wayzahealth.com. That's WAYZA health.com. And if you'd also prefer summaries of these talks to be sent to your email, just let me know. Send me a message and I'll be happy to add you to that list. Alrighty, I'll see you next week.